What up, guys? Thanks for joining us for this third episode of the XV podcast. So glad you guys could be with us. I am your host for this episode. My name is Abhimanyu, and I am joined by
Akash
and
Saif. What up, guys?
Alright, guys. So we're going to be going through 5 articles today, and we're actually going to be adding in a separate entertainment section just for our viewers' benefit and pleasure, and just so that we can talk about something that we all enjoy, entertainment and TV. Now, first of all, the first 5 articles that we're going to be talking about before this extra add-on of the entertainment section, the first article we're going to be talking about is about Russian billionaires. The second article is about Trump. The third article is about Britain, and the fourth article is about Germany, and the fifth article is about Michael Cohen. So now, returning to this first article about Russian billionaires, Saf, would you like to summarize that?
So basically the whole overall gist is that the wealth inequality in Russia basically is at the point where 98 people combined their wealth have more wealth than the average Russian, like all the Russian population combined. So it's basically talking about how at this point they basically have such a big wealth inequality system, and just by those 98 people combined, they have a total of around 428 billion, or was it million, guys?
Billion.
Dollars. $428 billion combined. And just that whole number is actually crazy when you're combining the combination of one of the biggest populations in the world, country-wise.
Yeah, and I think, Seth, that brings up a really interesting point about, when you have this smaller percentage, the 98 Russian billionaires, that's easily less than 1% of the Russian population. There is obviously a correlation between money and power, because money buys all of these things that can help people move up in the world. So it's really an interesting point to see that less than 1% of Russia's population has this much wealth and potentially this much control over their country. So I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, well, first of all, can anything even be done to overcome this vast imbalance of wealth inequality in the future? And is this even necessarily a bad thing? These Russian billionaires, obviously, some might take the viewpoint that they've had to work extremely hard in order to be able to raise that money, and they've proved themselves competent and able to use their resources wisely. So should this even be an issue that we're concerned about?
Well, in my perspective, I think this is an issue. Like the figure in the article says that there's an estimated 89% of the country's wealth, of the entire country's wealth, owned by its richest 10%. And this is a growing trend that's being seen throughout many different countries, where a small portion of people living in one country hold a large amount of the money. And I see this as somewhat of a problem, because 10% of people are experiencing the benefits, while the rest 90%, I guess, not so much have to suffer, but are experiencing worse conditions. And sure, you can say that these 10% have worked extremely hard, but in the case of Russia, I feel as though this wealth is generated more through familial ties and connections through illegal networks.
Interesting.
Not only that, but if you're looking at just not even 1% of the population has over, like Akash said, 87% of the total wealth of Russia. Russia is known to be one of the poorest countries out there if you're looking at just how much money they make by per capita. Their GDP per capita isn't that high. So if we're looking at a humanitarian perspective, this is definitely a problem, because as we said before, the people there are struggling to get by, while you have some people, the top 1%, banking in on everyone's hard work, and basically through connections and probably forceful takeover, they were able to live the lavish lifestyles that they are now.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think could be done to solve this problem? To just more evenly distribute the wealth throughout the nation in this country, in Russia, and in others.
Well, I mean, I think when you have the issue of wealth inequality, it's obviously you have the small, less than 1% of the population who has the majority of the wealth, which is what we see here in Russia, and then you have the mob, the mob majority who does not have this wealth and who consistently lives in envy and even potentially anger and hate towards this minority that has this power and this control and this seemingly perfect life that the mob always wants, right? And so I think that these two populations are always at odds with each other and are always conflicting with each other. And because of that, I don't think that, at least in the current state of Russia, I don't think that anything productive is being done in order to combat the issue of wealth inequality, mostly because everyone is just against each other. You have the mob who's against the 1%, and you have the 1% who's against the mob because the 1% believes that the mob does not have the capabilities in order to wisely use these extra assets and these extra resources that they possess. So I think that just because of this relationship and just because of this anger that both parties have towards each other, not much is being done currently to solve this issue. But I think that as far as the future is actually concerned, I think that convincing this minority to give up their wealth and to distribute it to the rest of the population is going to be very difficult. Mostly because this population actually believes that they have grown attached to the power that they have received with their wealth, and they believe that the country would actually degrade if they are not the ones in control of this wealth.
See, not only that, but I feel like it's just a major problem that capitalism itself creates. Monopolies. Sorry about that. So Russia says it's a communist country, but I wouldn't say so necessarily. I feel it's more communist towards the people rather than the people in power. So, and what happens is that there's an imbalance of power, and these 98 people seem to have taken it over. It can be seen in companies such as Apple, where they dictate over the U.S. phone economy, where Android phones or new startups don't have the potential to have that same success, just because Apple's already taken over the market and they are the ones who are running the show. Like McDonald's, for example, they're known to have their pockets in everything. They have fast food locations everywhere they go, so they become richer while everyone else doesn't make as much. So I feel like it's not a problem that we can really fix. It's just a problem that we have to deal with and try to make some corrections, some towards a capitalist society.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Saf. You have the issue. Capitalism is sort of its own spinning wheel. I mean, you have the people who are manipulating the capitalist market are the people who are in power, and they are the ones that are benefiting from manipulating the capitalist market. And you have the people who don't have the assets, don't have the resources, are basically out of this world entirely. So I just see this circle being spun around and around again, and I don't see change occurring anytime soon. Mostly because the idea of wealth is intangible in so many ways that it's difficult to dictate in a capitalistic society that you can only have this much wealth, even though you have several assets and several businesses, whether they be legit or not. You have several of these assets that are giving you this cash, and I don't think the Russian government will be able to intervene, and I don't think it wants to intervene, because I feel like the presence of this 1% in the country's government and in the country's politics is so powerful that I don't think we'll see change occurring anytime soon. And actually, this brings us back to something that happens in the United States during elections as well, the issue of super PACs and lobbying. So obviously people who lobby, and people who are in these super PAC committees, obviously they have a lot of wealth, and they are using their wealth to interfere in the country's politics. So even outside of Russia, we see the same example in the United States occurring as well. So I think that wherever you have a capitalist market, wherever you have people that can benefit from making this type of money, they will use that money to gain more of a presence in the country's politics and the country's affairs.
See, the one thing that I want to add, basically, is the reason why this is such a much bigger problem in Russia, as an outsider looking in, is because these Russians 1%, they don't have competition. Now, going back to like my Apple example, Apple's only dominant in the US. It's only dominant in North America areas, while Android runs the global perspective. Apple is trying to breach in there, but since the competition is between Android, they're trying to up their game and try to make it better experiences for the consumer, so the consumer actually knows which way to go. So basically, what's happening in Russia is they don't have competition. So what they can do is that they're taking all the money, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're using the freedom of not having anyone else taking their place to basically get what they want.
Do you guys think this is an inherent problem with a capitalist society where I get like one either product or market just starts to supersede all others and just start to dominate like Saif was saying with Apple, and how they've created such a huge market value. Like Apple is one of the wealthiest companies in the world right now. And I mean, despite the fact that Android is still more prevalent, Apple as a company is much more profitable than Google itself. So, do you guys think that this is just a problem with all, like, not necessarily a problem, or more like, do you think this is inevitable in capitalist societies, or do you think like this like something like one singular market or one single person or a single company taking over can be avoided?
I think that what you're describing is actually the definition of the capital market, because if you think about it, if you don't have one party triumphs over the other in terms of monetary value, then you don't have the motivation which the capitalistic society thrives on. I mean, the whole point of capitalism is to create competition between, competitors, so to speak, and the person with better product wins with regard to the consumer, because now you have the consumer having multiple options to choose from, so that improves the quality of the whatever is being sold or consumed by the consumer. And then you also have motivation by each individual company and each individual competitor in that market to bring out the best possible product and make the most monetary gain. So with all this competition, one party will come out on top, and then that party will dominate monetarily, because if you think about it, they have this money. It's in human nature to want to press that money to wherever it can go and to gain the most out of the monetary presence that the company now has. So yes, the company will interfere in potentially, depending on its roles and depending on its assets and resources that it currently has, it may interfere in United States politics in order to gain more of a presence. I just think that that's something inevitable and something that results from the basic motivation that occurs in a capitalistic society.
But is that necessarily a monopoly, though? Because what you're basically saying, why don't we have more monopolies than we do right now? If we're looking at car companies, there's Ford, GM, Chrysler, Honda, Toyota, all those companies. None of them is really better than the other. If anything, they're trying to become better, but by both parties trying to be better, it just ups the scale and basically ups motivation trying to be better. So it's not really making a monopoly in some sorts.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I see what you're saying there.
it is in market like that, but like if you think about like not the car industry, but more like the fast food industry or the smartphone industry or like the tech industry in general. You have these giants, you have these TNCs, transnational corporations with McDonald's, Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, who I guess you could qualify them as monopolies, where they take up a lot of the market value, and I mean it's really hard to get a tech startup started these days.
Yeah. All right, guys. With that, let's move on to the next article about President Trump. And Akash, would you like to summarize this one for us?
Sure. So, in the era of the 2011 attacks, President Obama expanded on things that President Bush did with the use of drones and targeted anti-terror operations. But due to the way in which these actions were performed and drone strikes and things like that, Obama was criticized for by people like human rights groups and others because of the fact that they were killing hundreds of civilians supposedly innocent civilians in these strikes along with terrorists. So Obama adopted a number of reforms during his second term, and one of these was the casualty reporting requirement. So one of the recent requirements in drone strikes is to report the number of people that have died in these drone strikes, and this was in a public report. It was mandated in a public report in July 2016 as an executive order, and recently, President Trump just ended this requirement, and he just issued an executive order revoking the requirement, and there is no clear reason as to why he did this. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think information like this should be revealed to the public?
Well, I'll start off the discussion on this one. I think that what Trump did and we've seen a pattern with Trump. I mean, homie just wants to basically oppose everything that Obama did, and the reason that he does this is regardless of your political views. I mean, President Trump, he's appealing to his base with pretty much everything that he does. I mean, we can understand a lot more of his actions if we just consider what would Trump's base want him to do. And I think that this exactly fits that scenario, because if you think about it, with Obama, I mean, whether he's right or wrong, right? I mean, whether it is correct to be releasing the number of people's who are killed in drone strikes, whether it is okay to release that information to the public or keep it as confidential, that's the president's decision and the decisions of the cabinet members who advise the president. But I feel like in our society, we really pride ourselves on trying to know the whole story. I mean, whenever you make a decision, it's important that you know all of the facts, you're aware of all of the facts, so that you can make the best decision. And I think that what Obama did, releasing the amount of people who are killed in drone strikes, I think that to many people that is a step in the right direction, because it's not one person's job to decide whether or not the entire population can know something or not. I mean, I feel like it's better if the information is out there, and then the people who, are affected by it, they can be affected by it, because the information exists nonetheless. It's just a question of whether they're being exposed to the public or not. And I think it's very important for the United States population to be educated on matters like this and understand the importance of these drone strikes and the consequences that they have. I think hiding that information is not doing anyone any good.
You know what the funny thing is? Well, you know how you just said Trump did this to help his own fan base?
Yeah.
So the thing is that not only were the humanitarian groups like human rights talking about adding the numbers, but it's also conservative media outlets. They were ragging on Obama to add these numbers and statistics as because they're thinking that he was hiding facts of how many people were being killed, and basically something that he didn't want to tell people. So it's kind of funny that Trump is flipping the script on his own people, and the people on right wing side are praising him for doing this, while left media is going crazy about it, saying that he's not giving people the knowledge that they deserve.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the issue of transparency, where people need to know what goes on behind the closed doors of the government. And I'm all for a more transparent government. I do not want a repeat of what happened in places like Germany. But this information, I mean, although it exists, is okay. According to the National Security Council, this releasing information about the number of civilian casualties during a drone strike, according to them, it does not improve government transparency because it distracts intelligence professionals from their primary mission, which is to provide an end to terrorism. And instead of doing that, they are as just counting how many civilians died. But they deem this action as superfluous, and these reporting requirements are absolute bogus to them. What do you guys think of that? Do you guys think there should be this type of information should be important, or do you think that the intelligence professionals should spend more time at the task at hand, as opposed to seeing the impact of the damage that they caused?
Well, I mean, Akash, I can see it going both ways. See, people saying that this is outside the United States. These are people who are killed in other countries in counterterrorism operations outside of war zones. And so I could see people saying it's not our business to know that, and it does not concern us. So we shouldn't be revealing that information to the public. But I also see the opposing side of that. People saying we are American citizens. We need to know what America is doing in places outside of America. We have the right to know. So I think that since the situation, it can be interpreted both ways by two different sets of people. And so I think that the best course of action is actually to release the data, have it available, so that the people who can use that information can use it, and the people who don't want to use that information don't have to spend time analyzing that and researching about it.
So I want to just jump back into what Akash was saying. So you're saying that these intelligent professionals, their main objective is to fight terrorism. What that basically reminded me of was like that one time in Mr. Z's class back in A push, where he said, "How can you fight an idea? Terrorism itself is an idea of causing panic in another country to basically get what you want." So if we're looking at what Mr. Z said, if you bomb, let's say a terrorist, you kill a terrorist in front of 5 kids, those 5 kids are more likely to believe in what that person died for, believe that he was a martyr, and go down his path of becoming a terrorist, of an enemy against the United States, basically. So do you think what we're doing, fighting this whole war on terrorism, is basically going the right direction it should be? Because if anything, I feel like it's causing more damage towards the United States, as you can't fundamentally fight an idea.
Yeah, no, okay. I agree with you, Saif, on that. Terrorism is based on an idea. It's based on the foundation is based in an idea that spreads. And I also agree that, I mean, I don't think the United States is taking a good approach to this, because I mean, their solution is to basically bomb all the terrorists and then they'll be gone. But that's not a viable solution. That's not a good option. That's
You're telling me, dude. I thought it was the perfect solution.
all right. See, sure you can end up killing every terrorist that exists right now, but like Saf said, terrorism is based on an idea. An idea is not based in people. So even if you kill everyone that is a terrorist, yeah, the basic idea of terrorism will still exist and will still come back in new forms.
See, the whole reason why I think the whole war on terror ended up being bombing countries where terrorism is prevalent is majority, I think, was the quickest solution, and it was basically because we didn't know how people were basically trained into going to terrorist groups. So, like, these terrorist groups, they're not dumb in recruiting people. They're actually quite smart, and they're manipulating them into believing in their ideals. They are contacting people from universities such as from universities in England, France, the United States itself, and they're contacting them, proposing their idea, and they're basically manipulating them into joining them. If anything, they're probably one of the most successful business operations out there, even though that's a horrible term to use. And you can't really fight that in a way of fighting people. It's more of a spread of knowledge and showing them the flaws of the arguments made by the other party.
Right. Like I mean, this war is I mean, quote unquote war. It's much different from traditional warfare. Like, I mean, like the Civil War. We were sure that I mean that was also based in ideology, but it was also based on like abolishing a core concept of the United States, which was slavery. But this is completely different, and it's not. People aren't fighting for lands. People aren't fighting for territory. People are fighting in order to, I guess, like get rid of an idea. And I feel like the solution is not as easy as just bombing different groups, or just like, you know, sending spies to infiltrate and gather intelligence so we can bomb them some more.
And the whole
Oh, sorry, Seth.
no, go ahead. I'll continue later on.
Oh, well, I mean, what I was just going to say was going back to terrorism is an idea, and not, you know, I mean, you can kill the leaders who are spreading this information, but at the end, I mean, if you kill them, more will just take their place, right? But I think instead of bombing whatever country that pops into the United States minds, I think a better approach would actually be to target the source of the problem. I mean, why is it that these people are being motivated to come into the United States or come into, I mean, we had instances in Europe as well. Why is it that these people are being motivated to come to these areas and kill a bunch of people while sacrificing their own life? And I think that targeting that root idea is far more important, because that would make sure that that if you kill the leader, no more would come and take their place. Because I mean, an example of this would be little kids are actually being recruited by organizations like ISIS, and they're being taught about Western ideas and everything wrong with the West, and how we think of their population as terrorists, and all this information is just being used against us to motivate these kids to join. And I think that is one of our biggest problems, is that people are able to recruit little kids against the United States.
See, the whole thing about killing the leader, no matter what aspect you do, you can't, like, if you're going with teaching then killing the leader, or killing the leader and going for what's going to happen next is inevitably that's not going to work out. So basically, an analogy I have for this is actually from the new PS4 Spider-Man game. Okay, so Spider-Man took down Kingpin, and as Kingpin was going into jail, as he was walking down to the cop cars, he says there will be a power struggle, and people far worse than me will come up. And that's exactly the whole storyline of the game for a majority aspect of it. So this philosophy is actually not that bad or anything faulty at all. So if we do kill, let's say, the leader of Taliban, what's to say that someone far worse won't come along, even if we do teach them? There's still going to be some of the outliers who will and still believe in that Westernism is bad, that they should be the ones in power, and everyone should have these fundamentalist ideals that they carry around. So, and they could just start up a new movement. It's the real thing that we have to do is like what Abhi said, is find the root of the problem, and that's a very complicated issue in itself.
Right, like an analogy I can think of is probably that. I mean, okay, getting rid of someone in power in one of these groups basically creates a situation similar to anarchy. And one of the main problems with anarchy is that it creates a power vacuum, and it creates a power struggle. And someone's bound to basically take up that spot and rise to the top. So, yeah, I agree with Saif. This is the root cause of this problem does not have a simple solution, and I guess we as a society need to work towards a better and more sustainable way to solve this problem.
But then again, there's also terrorists who have no ideals. If we look at school shooters are, yeah, sure, they're also mentally ill, but first, they're terrorists. They're causing terror within the school system, and they're trying to get a reaction. That's the whole point of terrorism. How can you battle someone who's mentally deranged, someone who is mentally not stable? How do you go with that type of terrorism if there really isn't no real solution for that? Is that just a problem that we have to face, like, and it's going to be like, oh, that sucks type of thing? Or is there anything that we can really do?
Well, I mean, in the case of school shooters, is like, they are mentally ill, and one of the biggest things that they do not do that they should is seek help with professionals, like going to things like therapy and getting help from other people. And I mean, I understand that, like, this is not a solution that can widely be applied to places like Yemen, but I mean, it is one possible solution, is to, I guess, just mentally look into these people and see how they process the world.
All right, guys. With that, let's transition into the third article that we're going to be talking about. This article, I'll go ahead and summarize it. It's about Britain urging the population to reject backwards U.S. safety standards. And so basically, this article talks about how the U.S. should join the back of a post-Brexit trade deal. And basically, it's arguing that animal welfare and food safety standards will be accepted in Britain. And so what's basically happening here is that Britain is deviating, or it's being urged to deviate from U.S. food safety standards, because the population there and the people in charge there are thinking that the U.S. safety standards, USDA approved and FDA approved safety standards, are actually backwards and not a true test of whether the food is safe to consume or not. So there's this whole debate going on, and so I just want to get your guys' thoughts on this. What do you think? How do you think this is going to play out? Because obviously we have the whole Brexit situation that happened. We also have the U.S. and Britain are pretty close allies, and I'm not sure. How do you guys think this is going to play out?
Well, okay, so I mean, I'm kind of agreeing with Britain here that the United States food health and safety standards are subpar, and they're not fully they don't fully encompass a healthy lifestyle. And I mean, things just for certain practices like using hormones in beef and chlorine washes in chicken. I mean, that's one of the major problems that the UK has, and that's one of the reasons why it's opposed to the practices here in the US. And they think that, I mean, the food, the market for food and agriculture remains pretty backwards in many respects. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's gonna be some tension between the United States and the UK, but this is just in the food market. The US and the UK still have trade in other aspects. So I don't think this will put a huge dent in our relationship, but it's just something that should be brought up.
So, like, a major thing that's coming up in these articles that I'm reading right now is it seems that they're opposed to hormone uses and basically what I'm considering GMOs. So, they're saying it's not a good thing for that, as because the United States isn't really dealing with it, they're just finding the easy solution out. And we Brits, we have farms to work on, and we don't take the easy way out. If the chicken is bad, we won't use it. So, are do you think that Britain's with this statement they're going for a non-GMO type thing, or is it basically focused on how the United States is cheap and not really going for the overall success and prosperity of food?
I feel like it's a combination of both. Like, I think the UK is really opposed to the way that we mass produce animals like chickens and things like in slaughterhouses and the conditions that they're raised in, and how like if you've ever seen them, how absolutely like disgusting they are, and they just don't want to have to deal with that. But also, they're also opposed to the increased and greater reliance on the use of antibiotics and GMOs. So yeah, it's a little bit of both that they're opposed to.
See, the antibiotic thing kind of makes sense because those antibiotics will end up going into our system after consuming them, and basically it will exponentially grow. It will grow at a faster rate of antibacterial resistant antibiotic resistant bacteria to grow at a faster rate, and it will basically cause the antibiotic dilemma that we're about to face in the near future come faster. So at that point I kind of agree with Britain, but at the same point, if we do eat the chicken and let's say it doesn't have the antibiotics, we could get sick from eating that as well.
Yeah, and things like using chlorine to wash chicken. I mean, that's also a potential problem. Like chlorine, like ingesting chlorine with the chicken is also another toxic aspect of it, along with the antibiotics. So, Abhi, what do you think of the U.S.'s current practices? Do you think they should be changed, or do you think just the sheer volume that is required by the American people demands this type of industry?
Well, I think that with that question, I mean, I think that I'm definitely I have the opinion that the USDA has too low of a requirement for food standards, and I think that I mean if you look at the health of the United States population, the U.S. as a country is not a very healthy country, and there are a lot of countries that are more have healthier standards than us. And I think that part of that reason is, I mean, well, obviously you have the fact that Americans don't eat healthy, period. But there's also the more concerning issue that since we tend to buy everything in bulk, I mean, if you look at retail stores, there's a huge emphasis on buying in bulk and how you can save a lot of money when you buy in bulk. I think that because of this, there's such a demand that the USDA has to constantly lower their limits, and I think that's exactly what's being discussed in the article here. I mean, you have the UK has a sophisticated and discerning market for food, but agriculture in the United States remains quite backward in many respects because the argument being made here is that, well, you have agriculture supposed to be used to benefit the health of the population. It's supposed to be a staple that we can rely on, and the constant use of antibiotics and the emphasis on just making as much of a product as possible with pesticides and not really much care to quality. I think that the USDA is turning a blind eye to this situation simply for economic gain.
See, I feel like just the sheer amount, just the culture in the United States plays a big role in the decisions by the USDA, especially since like the United States as a whole, the amount of meat that the average citizen consumes has increased by a large amount in the last couple decades. And I mean, to fit the needs of this growing needs of the population, I feel like the USDA thought it was like people are, especially as farmers, feel like they're forced to produce more just so that they can survive in this market. And having lower standards allows this to happen and also allows for the average consumer to pay less because less money is being invested into things like safer production of meat.
So this whole article, the whole statement that they made of U.S. basically trying to urge them to reject the U.S.'s whole food, like their whole food ideals, it's basically suggesting that Britain's going on a route of a no deal for Brexit. What do you guys think about that? Because a no deal for Brexit is the worst option that Britain faces right now. So do you think they've come to terms with it? Or do you think they're still trying to fight for a possibility that they can work something out with the EU?
Okay. What exactly do you mean by like no Brexit?
I not necessarily no Brexit, a no deal, where basically the EU and Britain, like the UK, cannot come to terms with what would be happen to, let's say, borders between Ireland and Scotland, how trading is going to work, how going to different countries are going to work, and what basically a no deal would happen is like how trading and all that stuff would work. A no deal, what would happen is the UK will be treated as another country, so all the regulations that it takes to, let's say, from France to the United States, all those same regulations would be applied to going from France to the UK. So what's basically going to happen is there's going to be a hard economic fall for the United Kingdom if they are going through this, because a majority of their businesses run on the fact that the UK and the EU have open borders. And basically, what's going to happen is that each truck, if a no deal, let's say a truck is going from the UK to Scotland or some country in that area that is not part of the EU or UK, each truck would have to be stopped for, let's say, a regular truck stop for like between borders, and let's say that goes up to at max 2.5 minutes. At max, that's time and money wasted, and that could cause a big downfall for both sides of a party. While another possible thing is a no Brexit occurs where the EU pretends they have a revote and joins back the EU and pretends like nothing happened. And a third option is that the EU and the UK come up with a proposal of how to leave the EU and what rules should be followed. And the thing is, the deadline for this whole dilemma that Britain is facing, the UK is facing, is coming up really quick. I think it's by the end of this month they have until they know what to do. And if they can't have anything, it's a no deal. And reports have said that the UK loses about 13% in the next 10 years, about in economics and economy-wise.
Yeah, no, see, I mean, I feel like the whole Brexit discussion was more like, I feel like I don't think, it's not like it sprung out of nowhere, but I feel like they didn't really have a full legitimate plan before going through with it. And I mean, yeah, especially in this issue, like you mentioned, Saif, that like transportation between countries is going to be slower than it was. I feel like the necessary legislation that needs to be passed, or the decisions that need to be made, especially with regards to the food industry, because of how much food needs to be imported into Britain, the whole transportation industry needs to be figured out.
So basically, an analogy that I can give to this whole situation is basically what happened was the politicians didn't really know if they wanted to stay in the European Union or if they wanted to leave. So they allowed the people to vote on it. So let's say just a hypothetical, the United States didn't know if they wanted to build a border wall or not, and they didn't want to figure out the logistics about it. So they held a voting and they let the people decide. The people more often than not would not know about the whole logistics and will not really be that informed about what would happen next, how this would affect themselves, and let's just say they vote yes, they want a border wall. So now it's basically up to the politicians to go from that idea and make all the logistics happen to have that. And then let's just say going on further and further, the United States population, the general people, find out that a border wall will cause lots of problems for them, and they're probably regretting their situation right now. And that's basically what's happening with the EU. They're regretting their Brexit decision. And it was also really close. I think the voting was like 51 to like 49%. So it was really split.
All right, Abhi, do you have any final comments on that?
No, but I think you guys pretty much said everything that I wanted to say, so that's good. Let's move on to the next article about Germany and working conditions there. Akash, would you like to take this one?
Sure. Okay, so Germany, in a study, found out. Well, this study was done by the labor minister Hubertus Heil of the center-left Social Democratic Party. Well, this is mainly where the issue comes from, that push for the right to work from home. And there was a study done, and it found that men and women with children use flexible working conditions differently. Work flexibility tends to lead to noticeably more overtime for men than for women. Given flexible work hours, men would work 4 extra hours per week and women work almost one, while when working from home, men worked 6 extra hours and women worked for one. And for women with children, work flexibility sees them spend more time caring for their children, and a total of 3 extra hours per week for women working from home, and 1.5 hours for those with flexible work times. And however, partially or fully flexible work hours for fathers led to less time spent on childcare per week, while home office made no difference. And that flexible work arrangements lead to less free time for both mothers and fathers. So this study has more to do with gender roles and what men and women are expected to do. And so what do you guys think of this? Do you think, and like the advantages, and there are disadvantages and advantages for working at home or being given flexible work arrangements. And I mean, they both are capable of making job and family time more compatible with one another. But what do you think, what effect do you think this has on the role divisions between men and women? And how does this impact them?
I feel like this could be summarized in a quote that actually the researcher said it herself. Work flexibility helps make job and family more compatible, but it can simultaneously cement the classic role divisions between men and women, or even make them stronger, said the researcher Yvonne Lott. So basically, what we see from this study is that men in Germany, when they work at home, they spend more time during work rather than, let's say, just a classic 9 to 5. So they're working around 6 hours more, while women are spending 3.5 and 1 hour more. So, and a major reason why that is due to children. So, because mothers are seen to be more caring and they spend more time caring for the children. So, if anything, it's actually what I would say reinforcing that stereotype that women are the only ones who care for children, while men do not. What do you think about like that whole, how this like basically stimulates our stereotypes and like how it reinforces stereotype thinking in our society?
Well, I mean, okay, so I feel like it perpetuates stereotypes where men are again seen to work longer hours and for extra time, and women are seen to spend more time caring for the children. But I feel like having extra time for, like providing extra time for both allows for a stronger connection with the family, with the parents and the kids, and it also helps in breaking down this division between men and women, because while women usually tend to take more time off due to caring for children, this prospect of giving work flexibility to both men and women allows both groups of people to take time off and support their families.
Yeah, so that's definitely true what you're saying. But a question that I have about this study is that it didn't generally explain why there was such a big difference between home working and flexible hours. They, in concept, are, let's say, relatively the same, Because in flexible hours, you're still working at home, am I right? Or am I getting confused?
Well, in flexible hours, it basically, instead of having this traditional 9 to 5,
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing that, you would have an 8 hour workday, but it would switch your timing. So, like, you would get a break in the middle of the day, kind of like how
Uh-huh.
the Spanish people live. So, you, instead of, you would be working for later, but you would also be working different schedules.
I see. Yeah, so like the main thing that I have with that is that the study really doesn't explain why there is such a big difference. It's just saying that there is. And what they basically do is that they do a meta-analysis of like 30,000 different cases, and that causes quite limitations because it is ecologically valid of what's happening because it's actually real things, real research is being done. It's not in a lab setting as traditionally experiments would be, but like it causes limitations of it's not really establishing a cause and effect relationship. So it's mostly a correlational study, and that could cause problems with the validity of what it means. So there could be some problems with what was basically being presented in this article.
Yeah, I mean, let's actually talk about that. So, the way in which the study was organized was that the head researcher, Lot, um, took a survey of around 30,000 German mothers and fathers between a 13-year period of 2003 to 2016, and she surveyed them based on their working conditions. So the flexible work conditions included working from home and as well as partially or totally self-determined work hours. And she took this data and examined how these conditions were tied to childcare, job overtime, and free time activities, including the amount of sleep you get per night and the amount of time spent with their children. So,
Okay. So there's quite a few good things that I heard in that. It's you said it was 2003 to 1?
2016.
2003 to 2016. So it has a 13-year period of time. So it's really good longitudinal wise. Like it has a longitudinal validity. Basically, it's done over a long time. It's at the same time, however, it's going through a survey
Right.
that could lead to like social desirability. And social desirability, it's when participants will answer questions to how they will look the best. So let's say a woman is being asked, on average, how often do you care for your children? She will more likely do higher hours than she actually does to make her seem like a good mom and make her results more socially acceptable. So in that context, it doesn't really account for that whole limitation. And some of the variables that they describe, like how they measure free time, what exactly do they constitute as free time? Anything that's outside of work? Or,
Yeah. That's a
okay, because some of their definitions could be vague and different studies could have different interpretations of exactly what they mean.
Yeah.
Because technically speaking, if they're doing anything outside of work, going to the bathroom itself could be seen as free time.
Right. And especially since these people are inputting this information in it through a survey, they could estimate their free time to be much higher than it actually is. Or they might even undervalue their free time because they want to show, like you said with the social desirability thing, they might want to show that they're actually working for they're more hard workers, and they're working for longer hours and don't have more free time, which could be one of the reasons that the men in the survey noted that
And
they work for 6 hours for an extra 6 hours when working from home.
Mm-hmm. And a whole nother problem with the study is that since it's so ecologically valid, there's a lot of confounding variables to establish the cause and effect relationship that I was talking about before. There's not a lot that you can control when you're looking at someone's household and you're measuring what they're doing. There could be external causes just not related to work that may be influencing your data, and I feel like that should be taken into account as well.
Right. All right. Let's go back to the issue that this article is mentioning and about the work hours. So, which do you think
Mm-hmm.
would be a better solution? I guess. Do you think that the traditional 8 hour workday should be replaced with a more, I guess, more family friendly type workday where the working hours are based on spending more time giving workers more free time and breaks in order to keep up morale and things like that and keep up productivity?
So, in essence of productivity, I feel like flexible hours would be the best. Just because the breaks, as humans basically start working, they start losing interest or motivation to keep up the same standard of work from beginning to end, as could be seen whenever we're doing a project late at night, where we start really well off, but by the end, our conclusion is only a sentence long. So, breaks in the middle can be seen as a very good idea, and it could boost morale definitely, which in essence would be a better thing for the companies.
I feel like this can be linked to a similar situation happening in other countries, especially in places like Spain, where they have this thing called a siesta, where in the middle of the day, it's a very cultural thing where they're allowed to just leave their jobs and spend time with their family, eating lunch at home. And I mean, this is seen in their culture, and it is a very good thing. It's able to provide them extra time with their families and keeps up their morale. And I feel like taking breaks time to time does increase overall productivity.
But
All
the
right.
main problem that the issue is, the whole problem of this flexible hours is going to be really hard to implement, as the 8 to 5 hours dictates so much of just how overall life is experienced at this point. It's such ingrained into our society that changing it would actually, I feel it'll cause problems for a couple of years.
All right. So on that note, I think we should shift to the final article on Cohen, on Michael Cohen. Saif, do you wanna go
So,
through this?
yeah, I would. So basically, this is going to be another part of what we said in our last podcast, and it's basically what Michael Cohen's next move is, as he was caught lying, basically. So he said that he will continue to cooperate. So basically, Michael Cohen has basically been going on around after being caught by the Mueller investigation, being found lying to Congress, and he says that he's willing to cooperate with them and try to work out and be as what you call very complacent of what will be going on and will not object to basically what will be happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think of this whole situation? Like, I know we talked about it last week, but like, do you think this whole investigation will actually reveal something, or are you or are you just like holding out hope that it would, or do you think that there won't actually be anything revealed by this whole investigation, especially this whole testimony part of it, especially like because Michael Cohen has been very close to Donald Trump and knows of multiple things, and he's revealed in his testimony to Congress last week that he knows a lot about what's happened with Trump and a lot of the information he's presenting, but he's also been presented as a liar before. So what do you think will be the outcome for this situation?
The outcome that I think that is probably the most probable is that something will be found, but it's not going to be the extent that the media is out there portraying. That, is going to be the thing that ends Trump, is going to be the reason why we get, basically, we're going to find Russian corruption and basically have collusion in the mix. I feel like what media is portraying it's kind of half and half. Yes, I do believe that there's going to be collusion found, but not to the extent that where people are saying that Donald Trump knew about everything. Donald Trump was talking to Putin the whole time, and he was the one who was the whole mastermind. If anything, like I said before, he's going to be found completely shocked and totally not knowing what would be going on, and I feel like there's going to be more underneath him, if anything.
Yeah. So what do you think about Cohen saying that he'll continue to cooperate? Do you think he's doing this just to, I guess, more of a publicity stunt, or do you think he's genuinely speaking like factfully and he wants to help the investigation further itself?
Well,
I don't think.
I think. Oh wait.
No,
you
can
go
go on.
ahead.
I mean, what I think is that. So, like Saif was saying, I don't think anything that useful, that important, is actually going to come out of this. I think it's just going to be more of the same, because we have had like revelations about Trump come up, and I think that this Russia thing is just being so overblown, especially by the people that oppose him. I don't actually think that anything useful will actually come from this. I feel like the facts that come out will be blown out of proportion. But I do think that, you got to understand, Michael Cohen is a very interesting character because, he really tried to stick up for Trump in the beginning, but as we see, that didn't really work out for him because the thing about Trump is that, his circle is really so small now. He's pretty much cut out all the non-essential people, whether it be through what's his name, the Breitbart guy. I forgot his name. Crap. What's that guy's name?
I know who you're talking about because he used to be a really big Trump
supporter. Steve Banner.
Steve Banner, yeah. He used to be a really big Trump supporter, but after he got fired, Trump started hating him, and the relationship kind of devolved very quickly. Same could be said about the secretary guy.
Rex Tillerson.
No. The guy who used to use the props and was made fun of a lot in SNL. What was his name?
On SNL?
No. Like the guy. He used to basically talk to all the news anchors, and he wouldn't really answer any of the questions. Rosa Pelosi, I think, was his
Nancy
replacement?
Pelosi?
Nancy Pelosi, something like that.
Wait, she's a Democrat.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
you're definitely right.
Yeah, I don't know who you're thinking about.
Dang.
Anyway, the point is the same, right? Like everyone who's non-essential has been cut out of Trump's close circle, and so I think that the same thing has happened with Michael Cohen. So now he might be collaborating, or now he might be, helping out the investigation. But I still think that if there was a collusion, I don't think that this is going to bring to surface everything that happened. Instead, potentially, we're just going to get another piece of the puzzle, and there's going to be another investigation that's opened up to try to figure out more. I think that this is just a cycle that's going to continue repeating.
All right, so does anyone else have any final comments on that?
No, I feel like we can move on to the entertainment section now.
All right, Abhi, do you want to introduce this?
Yeah, sure. So, like I guys mentioned, you're our viewers. We want to give back to you guys for sticking with us through 2 full episodes, and this will be the 3rd now. So we're going to actually introduce a new segment that we're going to call the entertainment segment. Just for this episode. Next week, we might come up with something different, but just for this episode, we're going to be talking about some entertainment, some good old TV shows, some important information that's come to surface lately about these TV shows and what's going on with them. So, 2 TV shows that we're going to be talking about. One, we got Game of Thrones, and the other, we got Arrow. Now, personally, I used to be a big fan of Arrow back in the day. I actually stopped watching some of the episodes, but the other podcasters have remained invested. I know, Saif, you're a big fan of The Flash and the Arrow, right?
I definitely did fall off, though, because I just didn't have the time to watch the shows. And frankly, I thought The Flash kind of went downhill after season 2. So I just slowly stopped watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I stopped watching The Flash around season 3. The whole Savitar thing, I was like, oh, when is this guy going to get revealed? Now, I mean, I will say I watched clips, like, later on, even after I stopped watching. I would go back and watch clips from The Flash or Arrow, just because, it used to be a big part of my life, and also just, just to keep in touch somehow, but gotta say, I didn't really keep up with the plot overall after about season 6 for Arrow.
Yeah, I mean,
season 5.
I kept up with everything up until a few weeks ago. So I'm caught up until everything up until the last crossover. So
okay.
Which was like maybe 5 episodes ago. And I still need to catch up. But I mean, even though I have been continuing watching it, that mostly comes from me being a longtime fan and not because of quality. I mean, it is an alright TV show, but it's not something very special. And
yeah.
Akash, do you want to summarize the... Oh, sorry, Seth. Go ahead, actually.
No, yeah, like what I would say, I'm not really a fan of the show. I would say I was a fan of the actors. I'm still a fan of Stephen Amell, Grant Gustin, and the main 2 actors of the show. And I feel like those 2 characters, they definitely carried what their show was putting out. And I'm not going to lie, there were some high points in Arrow and The Flash. Season 5 of Arrow was amazing, and season 2, season 1 of The Flash and season 2 were probably the best thing out ever in the whole CW verse of Arrow, Supergirl, DC Legends of Tomorrow, and The Flash combined. And I would say season 5 right now isn't actually quite that bad from what I've been hearing.
No, dude. Oh, season 5 of The Flash?
Yeah, season 5 of The Flash.
I mean, I will tell you this. I completely agree with what you said about season 5 of Arrow. I mean, season 4, I watched that, and let me be honest, I was very disappointed. I didn't think the plot was very good at all. Then I went into season 5. It got good really fast, and I think towards the last couple of episodes, I was really invested into that show. And so I continued with the first half of season 6 because of, the cliffhanger that they left off on season 5, and just because that season was such a good one. But then after that, I felt like Arrow kind of, tapered off. And that's why I stopped watching the show in the first place. But I do agree with you, Saf, what you said about the actors and how you can't imagine anyone else playing them. It's the same thing for me. I mean, I can't see anyone else playing the Flash other than Grant Gustin. I mean, I don't know, have you guys seen Justice League?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like Ezra Miller, the guy who plays the Flash in that one, I mean, I really, really cannot see him as the Flash. I felt like Barry Allen that I grew up watching as part of the DC or CW Flash. I feel like that was much more authentic representation. I feel like he plays the part so well.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. The characters, the actors definitely do bring out the best of the show because our boy Connor Brown is actually in love with Stephen Amell. He actually met him in person, and he was basically fanboying all over him.
I mean, I would be fanboying all over Stephen Amell if I had the pleasure of meeting him as well.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Bro, homie's got a nice little body, dude.
He does. He actually does.
Alright, so on that note, we're going to talk about some actual events that are occurring with the Arrowverse show. So, Saif, do you want to talk about what happened?
Yeah, so basically this is actually really recent. At the time of recording, it probably happened an hour of this point. So basically what happened is Arrow is getting canceled after season 8, which would be the next season around fall. They will have a shortened series episode length of only 10 episodes. So they'll probably get through the crossover, and after that, probably end it off from there. And it's actually quite bittersweet to let Arrow go. Arrow did fall off very hard, but at the end of the day, it was one of the main big shows that I started watching when I came into high school, and just in general too, because before that, I didn't really watch those types of shows. So it's kind of bittersweet for me.
Right, and Arrowverse also Arrow, the show, also started off the Arrowverse. The success of Arrow on CW is what directly led to the creation of the following TV shows like The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow. Those are all direct results of the superhero genre of TV series becoming very popular.
Don't forget, it also influenced Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Lightning, and the Carter Peggy show.
Exactly.
Forgot what it. Yeah.
That whole genre is just. It all owes itself to the success of the very first. And it's going to be sad to let it go.
People can say it was Smallville, that Superman show, but that wasn't quite as popular as Arrow. Arrow, for me, was definitely the thing that popped off the whole superhero TV show craze that we're seeing right now.
I mean, if I had to say, actually, I would say that Arrow season 1 was great. Season 2 was great. Season 3 was okay. Season 4 was bad. Season 5 was great. Season 6 was okay. I mean, that's sort of my thinking. If I had to, I'm just curious to get your guys' opinion on this as well. But if I had to pick favorites, I would probably say Season 2 and Season 5.
You know, I'd have to agree with you on that. And also,
I feel like
since I've watched Season 6 and Season 7, I think Season 6 is decent, but the villain it sets up is much better. Overall, as a season, it falls flat, and Season 7 is alright so far.
Wait, isn't the villain for Season 6, isn't it that, Richard Dragon or Ricardo Diaz or whatever?
Ricardo Diaz. Yeah, it's the same person. It's the first time in a series where the villain is carried over for more than one season.
Yeah, that's...
Didn't they take him out yet? Or, because I know he's not the main big bad of the season, from what I've heard.
From what I've, up to what I've seen, he still is the big bad.
Okay.
And
so, do you think this whole cancellation of Arrow, because do you think it's going to trickle down to The Flash, Supergirl, and Legends of Tomorrow? I can see Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow because they don't get as many viewers, but do you think it might happen to The Flash as well? Because The Flash is actually one of the biggest money makers for CW. Would you think they would do it?
I mean, one of the biggest things that happened earlier this year in the entertainment business was the cancellation of shows like Daredevil, like all the Marvel shows. So the cancellation of Daredevil, the cancellation of Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, The Punisher.
I think Jessica Jones is still going on.
I'm pretty sure they are, but cancellation is coming soon for them.
Yeah, because I think they were greenlit for season 3. So after they make that, I feel like they're canceling it.
Right. So they all met similar fates, but that situation had more to deal with like corporate responsibilities, where Netflix was not making as much money as they would have liked to, since
No, I don't think
the
that's
property
true,
is
though,
owned
'cause
by Disney.
that's true, but Daredevil was still the biggest moneymaker for Netflix. It was still one of the most watched shows. So I was reading an article and I thought it was due to creative disputes between Marvel and Netflix itself.
I feel like it might have been just a compilation of both of those things. But
Okay.
I mean, coming back to the the CW universe, I feel like that kind of situation won't happen here because the CW owns the rights to these characters.
The TV rights?
The TV rights to these characters. They're not in a financial problem. And they don't need to cancel shows based on creative disputes.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like these shows would continue, and I mean Arrow lasted for 8 seasons. Even though I guess it started reaching its own fall off point. So I feel like giving the other shows would also be given more time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on to the next big news and entertainment. Game of Thrones.
Hell yeah, dude. That's one of my favorite shows. I mean, I actually got into that after you did, and after our boy Matt. He was the first one who got into this, then you, then me. I gotta say, I grinded that show out in 3 months, I think, and the reason that it actually took me so long, I mean, I would have definitely finished earlier, but I think Akash, you had this issue as well. It's just there was so much stuff that would happen at the end of the season, and it was just so emotional stuff that happened that I was like, I don't think I can watch the next season, even though it was really good. And I just think that because of that, I actually delayed myself a bit, and I think that I could have finished the season even earlier than it finished the show even earlier than that. But gotta say, I'm really hyped for this final season. I'm really interested to see how it turns out. Just yesterday, the Game of Thrones season 8 trailer came out. Watched that. Very interesting stuff, I gotta say.
So I'm not gonna lie, I haven't finished Game of Thrones. I'm actually only on season 1, episode 7. And the thing about it for me is I already know what's happening because I'm the type of person who spoils things for myself. But Game of Thrones was such a weird thing that I spoiled it before I even watched it. Because before Akash, Abhimanyu, Matthew urged me into watching Game of Thrones, I was like on the mindset I would never watch this in my life. I don't want to watch it. It's not my thing. But I've watched it and I watched the first episode because they've been urging me. And I'm not gonna lie. What I've seen so far, it's pretty good. And I've just stopped myself because I don't want the thing that I know is going to happen to happen. So in some sort, I'm like delaying what's going to happen. But like I already know what's happening. So yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I also watched the season 8 trailer. I'm like, yo, I don't know any of this, but looks cool.
I mean, honestly, Seth, though, I mean, you still got time. I mean, we got 30
April 14th.
days.
April
13th.
April.
Yes,
Yeah.
you still got over a month to grind out those seasons, and trust me, you won't be disappointed, dude. Every season gets better and better.
Yeah, I'm probably going to watch an episode or two probably today. Hopefully. Grind that stuff out. And then,
I mean, yeah, you
should we-
have 39 days until the new season comes out.
I definitely have enough time, bro. 39 days? Nothing.
Yeah.
My lactose intolerance is increasing.
All right, so the final thing we're going to talk about is newly released movies. And I mean,
Has
right
Captain
now,
Marvel been released?
I mean, not so much released, but or like close proximity to being released. So, uh, let's see. What do we have? We have in this month we have How to Train Your Dragon 3, the Lego
Seems like
Movie
a good
2.
movie. Mm-hmm.
Both of those seem like great movies. I actually really want to see How to Train Your Dragon 3, especially since I'm the type of person who gets really invested into like created universes
Soundtracks?
and soundtracks. Yes,
Oh.
John Powell has an amazing soundtrack in this. But so basically, I watched the first movie, and then I watched the second one, and I got so invested in it that I realized that there were 8 seasons to a spin-off TV show, or not so much a spin-off, but like a TV show about these characters. That I watched all 8 seasons in the span of a month. So I was pretty
Dang.
hyped for this, and I mean, yeah, that hype kind of died down from when I watched them, but I still want to go see it.
What else is
And-
coming out besides those two?
Well, from the time of recording this, in 2 days, we have the next new entry to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Captain Marvel.
Uh-huh.
And
I honestly don't think that's going to be a good movie. Like, it's not going to be the best Marvel
Yeah.
movie.
Dude, I saw the trailer for that, and I ended up more confused than I previously was. I mean, I don't understand I understand somewhat the plot, like with the Kree or whatever, but
Mhm.
I don't really see the appeal of it, and I also don't see how it's gonna. I feel like my issue with Captain Marvel is it feels forced. It feels like the movie was only made in order to incorporate Captain Marvel into Avengers 4 Endgame. And so I feel like the movie is forced in that regard, and I'm looking a lot more forward to Avengers Endgame than Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
I
because the
think
thing
that's...
is,
No, go ahead.
Infinity War was such a great movie. You cannot watch another Marvel movie after that. So Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel are gonna be hit with that greatness of what Avengers Infinity War was. Ant-Man definitely got hit with that. It did not do as well as people predicted it would be if it was in, let's say, a regular Marvel time slot that was not after Infinity War. So I felt those two movies should have been done before Avengers Infinity War.
I mean, in terms of story, they probably fit. I feel like Captain Marvel just now coming out is mostly due to technological reasons. Like, if you've seen the trailers of Samuel L. Jackson de-aging, it looks very real. There is, I don't get any uncanny valley from him, and I mean, it's impressive, the CGI in this movie. But I mean, my main problem with it has to do, like, I've from the action scenes I've seen, is it looks really good. That's not, like, my main problem is with Brie Larson. I feel like she's a very flat actor from what I've seen her in. I mean, but I'm still pretty optimistic. I'm an optimistic person when it comes to these kinds of things.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't think it's Brie Larson's fault. I just think it's the first Captain Marvel movie. Marvel has the track record of their first movies being very bad compared to the later onset of the trilogy. The only exceptions that I can really think of are Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And maybe Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man.
For sure.
But those are, I would say Ant-Man's probably the stretch. Because
I mean, Ant-Man
a lot of people
was a good movie. I liked the first iteration.
Yeah, but if you're looking at,
wasn't that great. But
yeah,
I mean, that's a lot of exceptions you've got there.
I guess, but like comparing Iron Man, Thor, Captain America.
Wait, are you saying the first
of-
Iron Man was not a good movie?
First Iron Man, it was good, but I don't think it was the best.
I feel like you should go back and rewatch it. I have different opinions on that.
I mean, it was definitely a good movie, but like it was the first Marvel movie. Would you say Iron Man's was as good as Spider-Man: Homecoming?
See, I feel like I mean, okay, look, if Iron Man wasn't good, then we would have no MCU. And I did like Iron Man 1, and I actually do think it's better than Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Okay.
That's just my
Okay.
personal opinion. Because
Okay.
I like what they did to Tony Stark as a character. I like what they did with, you know, the just the overall idea of it. And
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm not gonna lie. Tony Stark's character development was probably one of the best things we've seen out of Marvel. And my main problem with Captain America was the villain was so not Captain America, Iron Man. The villain was so I actually think he was an afterthought to the whole story. The villain was really bad in that movie.
See, I didn't get that. I think Obadiah, I think that's his name.
Obadiah Stane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know Abby remembers because he went through and watched the entire MCU.
Yeah, dude. Right. What movie was it? Yeah, before Infinity War. I didn't actually see Infinity War with the squad with you guys. I saw it, on my own at home. And so before I watched Infinity War, actually, I went through and watched every single MCU movie during the summer, and I was actually filling in Akash while I was watching. I watched all of the Iron Man. I even watched like the Incredible Hulk and things that weren't really essential to the plot of Infinity War simply because.
How are the Thors? The Thors.
What?
How are the Thor movies?
Okay, so I liked the first. Obviously, Ragnarok was the best one. I think that's pretty much universal.
Yeah.
But Thor: The Dark World, that was like absolute garbage. I did not like that movie at all. The first one was okay. I mean, the first one was good actually. The second one was bad, and the third one, Ragnarok, was the best, I would say.
Yeah. So Captain Marvel, going back to that, the main problem that has happened, it may be an amazing movie. Don't get me wrong. We haven't seen it. We don't know the reviews. It may be the best movie after Infinity War and all that. But there's no hype for it. There's no buzz about it. It's not the same buzz that Infinity War had. It's not the same buzz that even Black Panther or Spider-Man had. It seems like a Marvel movie that just the fans forgot existed.
I feel like that has to do more with the character being introduced. Like, people already have had, people have had experience with Spider-Man. There were 2 franchises before, and they just they liked the new one, and that was introduced in Civil War, and they wanted to go see it. Black Panther, it was an all-black cast movie, basically. It was directed by a black person. It was just a huge step forward in the representation for black people in the entertainment industry. So that was something that it had going for it. Captain Marvel.
What about Guardians of the Galaxy? That had more buzz than Captain Marvel, and no one knew.
I feel like that was more due to the fact that it's before Infinity War.
Mm-hmm.
It was in that time where just like any project that Marvel put out was just becoming successful.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Marvel, after Infinity War, people are just not that excited to go see a superhero movie. And
not that excited. I feel like they're just waiting for Endgame.
Yeah, like I feel like the only reason.
Do you top Infinity War?
What?
How do you top Infinity War? That's my whole question.
That's right.
Going forward.
Like, Captain Marvel is a very unknown character, especially since there's this whole like debacle between Captain Marvel and like Marvel and DC. Captain Marvel is originally a DC character.
No, they just share the names.
Well, I mean, DC
Captain Marvel
came first. The DC version of Captain Marvel came first, and Captain
that's
Marvel.
Shazam.
That is, he's
Captain
been
Marvel for
branded
DC
to Shazam in
Yeah.
in the DC cinematic universe. He's actually coming out with his own movie later this year. But yeah, I feel like that whole like confusion and just the relative unknown, like the relative unknownness, I guess, like how little she's known about Captain Marvel, just has turned people away from this movie.
And I feel like the villain group will also hurt because the Kree haven't been established in any of the Marvel movies. We don't know what they are. We don't know what they want. And it's supposed to be a prequel to the whole MCU, but they should have had some like an Easter egg about the Kree, like, oh, the Kree do exist in this movie universe.
I mean, I feel like that has to do with
So I think that
continuity, and I mean, like Marvel as a company, like needs to think about the long term. And one of the problems is I guess they just didn't know they don't know what their future projects are gonna be. So having like Easter egg for the Kree, for example, is not something that's gonna be easy to do.
But then again, Marvel has movies planned for like multiple years to come. So they
Right,
definitely
now at this point they do.
Wait,
During the
but
production of
aren't
other
the contracts
movies.
going to expire? Like for Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr.
That's why people think in Endgame they're going to die. So the actors could be doing other things.
Dang.
Yeah.
All right, so we're reaching the hour and a half mark.
All right. I mean, is there anything that you guys want to add, or we can just call it an episode then?
Besides those three, are there any other big movies? Because I feel like for March, it's already pretty good movie month.
Yeah, besides Captain Marvel, there are no other big budget movies coming out.
Well, then again, so as a final thing, I feel like this has been a pretty good month for March movies.
Yeah.
So, yeah, at this point, I think we could just wrap it up.
All right, Abhimanyu.
Yes. So if that's all, then thank you, viewers, for being with us on this third episode of the XB podcast. We'll see you guys next week.
See you.
See you.
See ya.
All right.